What if your father's silence cost 2 lives, and the warning signs were screaming the whole time? It starts with a phone call. Not the kind you can ever forget. Not the kind where someone asks if you're sitting down. Because by the time Tracy Reiner heard the words, her knees had already given out. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Her father, Rob Reiner. Hollywood legend, cultural icon. The man who gave the world When Harry Met Sally and The Princess Bride, was dead. Her stepmother, Michelle, also gone. Murdered. Stabbed to death inside the very home they once filled with laughter, premieres, and Sunday dinners. And the killer? The police weren't chasing shadows. They were knocking on the guest house door, where her half-brother, Nick Reiner, had been living for months. Let that sit for a moment. Because what followed wasn't just a tragedy. It was a revelation. A slow, chilling unearthing of ignored warnings, sealed secrets, desperate pleas, and a daughter who swears she tried to stop it all. According to Tracy, this didn't have to happen. In fact, she claims it was entirely preventable. For years, she says, Nick displayed disturbing behaviors. Aggression, paranoia, and most terrifying of all, an obsession with the idea that his parents were trying to destroy him. She tried to tell Rob, over and over again. She begged him to act, to take action, to intervene. But he didn't. Not because he didn't care, but because, in Tracy's words, he cared too much about how it would look. The optics, the reputation, the press. So he did what so many in power do when faced with family chaos. He minimized. He dismissed. He stayed quiet. And now, 2 bodies lay cold in a Brentwood mansion. And Nick Reiner, once the bright-eyed child who walked red carpets, is in custody, charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. But the public only knows the tip of the iceberg. What Tracy is about to reveal in her private journals, her sworn interviews, and her testimony to prosecutors will flip everything we thought we knew about the Reiner family on its head. Because this isn't just a Hollywood tragedy. It's a slow-burning family implosion. And at the center of it all is one haunting truth. She warned them. So, why didn't anyone listen? Let's rewind. Let's go back, before the crime scene. Before the flashing lights. Before Romy, Rob's youngest daughter, called 911 in tears. Let's go back to the first warning. To the first time Nick said something that made Tracy's blood run cold. To the moments that seemed small at the time, but now feel impossibly loud. Because stories like these don't start with screams. They start with silence. And that silence? It's exactly what Tracy Reiner is finally breaking. Rob Reiner wasn't just a household name. He was an institution. The son of Carl Reiner, raised in the golden age of television. The man who gave generations a cinematic voice. A progressive, vocal, well-loved figure in entertainment and politics alike. But behind closed doors, things were unraveling. To the outside world, the Reiners were a tight-knit family. Rob and Michelle, married for decades. Their children, some biological, some adopted, some from previous relationships. All seemingly connected, creative, thriving. But family isn't about press photos. It's about the quiet moments behind closed doors. And in those quiet moments, Tracy says a storm was brewing. Nick had always been different, she says. Creative, intense, wildly intelligent, but unstable. Prone to mood swings, fits of anger, paranoia. He struggled with substance abuse as a teen. He'd been to rehab more than once. There were even rumors, Tracy says, of psychiatric holds in the past. Whispers never confirmed, buried under Hollywood's polished smile. Still, Rob never wanted to make it public. He believed in privacy, in family, in control. He believed Nick could get better, on his own. He believed that with love and space, things would settle. But what if that belief cost him his life? That's what Tracy Reiner wants the world to ask. Because she remembers every warning she gave. She remembers the phone calls, the quiet interventions, the arguments, the final fights. She remembers the night she told her father, in tears, "Dad, you have to get him out of the house. He's dangerous." She remembers how Rob responded. "He's just lost. Don't exaggerate. He's our son." And she remembers the last time she saw Michelle alive, her eyes wide with something unspoken, a quiet look that said more than words ever could. She knew, but she didn't act either. Because sometimes, being part of a famous family doesn't make you safer. Sometimes, it makes you trapped. especially when the person you fear is your own flesh and blood. Rob Reiner was the one who found the bodies. Imagine that. Your father, your mother, lifeless, your world in pieces, and a single voice in your head saying, "This isn't a random attack. You know who did this." According to LAPD reports, Romy immediately told officers there was a dangerous family member they needed to question, one who had threatened before, one who should be a suspect. That statement shattered the illusion, because this wasn't a break-in. It wasn't a robbery. It wasn't random. This was personal, and the suspect was family. But here's what no one expected. Tracy didn't just agree with Romy. She had been screaming it for years. She had emails, texts, voice messages, journal entries. She'd pleaded with Rob, warned Michelle, tried to get Nick professional help. She had even approached lawyers, quietly, asking about conservatorship laws. But every time, she was told the same thing. Don't destroy the family. Don't go public. It'll make it worse. So she stayed quiet. And now, that silence echoes like a gunshot in an empty room. This video is not about sensationalizing a tragedy. It's about exposing what happens when reputation matters more than reality. When the signs are all there and no one acts. When someone tries to do the right thing and is told to sit down. Tracy Reiner has broken her silence. And in the coming chapters, you'll hear everything she's ready to reveal. The disturbing journal Nick kept hidden in the guest house. The audio tapes prosecutors believe may contain premeditation. The terrifying final fight between Nick and Rob just weeks before the murders. And the one moment Tracy believes could have stopped it all, if only her father had listened. Because this wasn't a spontaneous act of madness. It was a slow build. A pressure cooker. Years of warning signs, ignored. And what comes next in this story is even more disturbing. Because the truth isn't just tragic. It's infuriating. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Can a murderer once be the person who made you laugh until you cried? That's the question Tracy Reiner still asks herself every single day. Because before the headlines, before the blood on the marble floors, before the handcuffs and courtroom gasps and whispered words like psychotic break and premeditation, there was just Nick. Not Nicholas Reiner, 32-year-old accused double murderer. Not the face on the evening news. Not the suspect now confined to a mental health ward awaiting trial. But her baby brother. Her Nicky. The boy who once slipped love notes under her door. Who begged her to sneak him jelly beans before dinner. Who cried when she left for college. He was sweet. Sensitive. And yes, complicated, but not this. Tracy's voice shakes when she talks about it. Not just because of what he became, but because of who he used to be. And maybe that's what makes it all so hard to process. Because evil doesn't always walk in wearing a mask. Sometimes it grows quietly, inside the walls of a beautiful home. And by the time you notice it, it's already too late. Nick Reiner was born into a world of cameras and scripts. But his story was never scripted. The son of Rob Reiner and Michelle Singer, Nick was the youngest in a blended, high-profile family. From the outside, everything looked perfect. Private schools, nannies, A-list parties. A Brentwood estate filled with laughter, success, and purpose. But behind the scenes, there was a subtle unraveling. According to Tracy, it started early. Nick was always intense. Even as a toddler, she says, he had moods that flipped like a switch. One minute he was climbing into your lap and calling you his favorite, she recalls. The next, he was locked in the bathroom refusing to come out for hours. It wasn't tantrums. It wasn't rebellion. It was something else. Something unnameable. Back then, at least. And the more people tried to ignore it, the deeper it burrowed. By the time Nick was 10, the house had developed an unspoken rule. Don't upset Nick. Everyone danced around it. Even Rob. Especially Rob. Tracy remembers it like a scene from a movie. Nick would say something rude to a staff member. No consequences. He'd break things. No consequences. He once locked the family dog in a closet for 6 hours. And when Michelle screamed, Nick's only response was, "She was annoying me." Rob chalked it up to stress. To hormones. To the creative mind of a misunderstood genius. He's just different, Rob would say. He's figuring himself out. But Tracy wasn't convinced. Because Nick wasn't just acting out, he was spiraling. Fast. And no one wanted to call it what it was. Not mental illness. Not instability. Not danger. Just drama. Just teenage angst. Just another misunderstood rich kid in the hills of Hollywood. But then came 2011. And everything changed. Nick Reiner was hospitalized for the first time when he was 18. It was never publicly reported. There were no tabloids, no mugshots, no statements. But Tracy remembers it vividly. She had gotten a call from a friend of Nick's. "He's not okay," the friend said. "He's saying he hears voices. He thinks people are watching him." Tracy rushed over. Nick was pacing, sweaty, muttering under his breath. "I can't sleep. I don't trust Mom. I don't trust Dad. They're plotting something." Plotting what? No one ever got a clear answer. But that night, Nick was taken, quietly, to a private psychiatric facility. And when Rob arrived, he didn't cry. He didn't panic. He just looked defeated. "I don't want this getting out," he said. "We'll handle it." But handling it, Tracy says, meant something different in Hollywood. It didn't mean extended treatment. It didn't mean medication compliance. It meant damage control. Nick was released in under a week. And the narrative, at least within the family, was this. He had a bad reaction to something. He's fine now. But Tracy knew he wasn't fine. She had seen the look in his eyes. The way he stared straight through her. Like he was there, but not really. It wasn't a phase. It wasn't drugs. It was something darker. And it was growing. Over the next few years, Nick spiraled in waves. Some months he was functional. Even productive. He helped on movie sets. He co-wrote a screenplay with Rob. He went to therapy. He even talked about launching a production company. But there were cracks in the foundation. Paranoia. Disconnection. Delusions. He believed paparazzi were following him when no one was. He'd accuse Michelle of reading his journal when it was still sealed. He'd scream at Tracy for trying to steal his thoughts. And then came the night she'll never forget. It was 2016. Thanksgiving dinner. The family was gathered at the Brentwood estate. Candles lit. Table set. Warmth in the air. Nick was unusually quiet all evening. Polite. Almost too polite. He helped carve the turkey. Made conversation. Even complimented Rob's cranberry sauce. But something felt off. Too rehearsed. Too calm. After dinner, as guests filtered into the living room, Tracy found herself alone with Nick on the patio. "You doing okay?" she asked, cautiously. He looked at her, eyes glazed. Then smiled. "I figured it out," he whispered. "Figured what out?" His smile widened. "You're all trying to erase me." Tracy froze. "What are you talking about?" "You. Dad. Romy. You think I don't see it, but I do." He stepped closer. "I see everything now." That night, Tracy didn't sleep. The next morning, she called her father. "Dad, something's wrong. He needs help." Rob listened. He nodded. He promised he'd talk to him. But nothing changed. Nick remained in the guest house. His behavior got stranger. And Rob kept insisting. "He's fine. Just stressed." But Tracy knew what stress looked like. And this wasn't that. This was a storm. A brewing, boiling, ticking clock. And she couldn't shake the feeling. When it went off, someone was going to get hurt. In 2019, a housekeeper quit abruptly. She told Michelle that Nick creeped her out. Said he watched her from the upstairs window. Once asked her if she believed in vibes. Michelle dismissed it. "He's just eccentric." But Tracy pressed further. She started documenting things. Strange emails. Late-night texts. Odd behavior patterns. She even reached out to a psychiatrist anonymously to describe the behavior. The response: "He sounds like someone who may be experiencing a schizophrenic break. He needs full evaluation immediately." Tracy printed the email. She gave it to Rob. His reaction? He folded it, placed it in a drawer, and never brought it up again. And so life went on. Until it didn't. Because even the most dysfunctional families can maintain a fragile illusion. Until the moment it snaps. And in the Reiner home, that illusion snapped the moment a kitchen window shattered one late evening in June. Shards of glass on the floor. No sign of forced entry. Nothing stolen. When questioned, Nick simply said, "I thought someone was watching." Police were never called. And once again, the family moved on. Because denial is easier than confrontation. Until someone ends up dead. And by then, it's too late. But what happened next, Tracy says, confirmed everything she feared. And it began with a leather-bound journal she found beneath Nick's bed. What if the truth was written down, line by line, and the only person who could stop the tragedy chose not to open the pages? Because that's what Tracy Reiner says happened next. Not a rumor. Not a feeling. Not hindsight. Ink on paper. A diary. And a decision that, in her words, still screams at me in the middle of the night. It was early morning when Tracy found it. The house was quiet in that eerie way it gets just after sunrise. Too still, too calm. The kind of calm that makes your skin prickle, like the air itself is holding its breath. Nick had left the main house hours earlier and retreated to the guest house. Again, that was his pattern by then. Disappear. Isolate. Return like nothing happened. Tracy didn't go looking for trouble. She went looking for answers. Because something in her gut wouldn't let her stop. She remembers standing in Nick's old room. Half-packed boxes, a stale smell of cologne and dust, posters peeling off the walls. The room looked abandoned, but not forgotten. And that's when she saw it. A leather-bound notebook shoved beneath the bed. Not hidden carefully. Almost placed. As if part of Nick wanted someone to find it. Tracy hesitated. Have you ever had that moment? That split second where you know whatever comes next might change everything? She knelt down anyway, pulled it out, and opened it. The first page looked harmless enough. Messy handwriting, dates scribbled in the margins, fragments of thoughts. But by the third page, her chest tightened. By the fifth, her hands were shaking. And by the 10th, she couldn't breathe. The diary wasn't a journal of feelings. It was a record of suspicion, of resentment, of fixation. Nick wrote about being watched, about them trying to control him, about his parents smiling in public while plotting behind closed doors. He wrote Michelle's name over and over again, sometimes crossed out, sometimes underlined so hard the pen tore through the paper. One line stopped Tracy cold. They think I don't see it, but I do. And when the time comes, they'll finally understand. Understand what? She flipped the page. Another entry. Another date. More rage. He accused Rob of stealing his ideas, of sabotaging his future, of keeping him small. He wrote about Romy too, calling her brainwashed and dangerous in her silence. And then there were the drawings. Jagged sketches, dark shapes, stick figures with knives for hands. A house. Always the same house. Windows shaded in black. Tracy closed the diary. Her mind raced. Was this fantasy? Art? A cry for help? Or something else entirely? She needed Rob to see this. Immediately. When Rob Reiner read scripts, he read carefully. Line by line. Margin notes. Questions. But when Tracy handed him the diary, he didn't read it like a script. He skimmed. Flipped pages quickly. Too quickly. This is just venting, he said. Tracy stared at him. Dad, this isn't normal. Rob sighed. You're overreacting. That word. Overreacting. It felt like a slap. She pointed to a page. He thinks Mom is plotting against him. Rob shrugged. He's angry. He's hurt. People write crazy things when they're emotional. Tracy flipped to another page. He talks about when the time comes. What time? Rob closed the diary. I don't want to read this. That was the moment. The exact moment Tracy says something inside her broke. Because this wasn't denial anymore. This was refusal. He placed the diary on the table like it was radioactive. I'm not going to turn my son into a criminal over a notebook, Rob said. Tracy's voice rose. No one is saying criminal. I'm saying dangerous. Rob stood up. This family has been through enough. There it was. The subtext. The unspoken rule. Protect the family. Protect the name. Silence the noise. Tracy left that day feeling invisible and terrified. After that, she started watching more closely. Every interaction. Every tone shift. Every slammed door. Nick changed after the diary. Not calmer. Not relieved. Sharper. Colder. He stopped arguing. Stopped pleading. He started smiling. And that smile? It wasn't relief. It was certainty. Weeks later, Tracy got a text from Nick at 3:17 a.m. You know what's coming. No emojis. No context. Just that. She called him immediately. No answer. She called Rob. He's asleep, Rob said. You're reading into things again. Again. That word echoed. Tracy drove to the house anyway. She found Nick sitting in the guest house, lights off, staring at his phone. You okay? She asked. He looked up slowly. Better than you think. Her stomach dropped. You scared me with that text. He smiled. Good. That was the first time Tracy truly felt afraid of him. Not worried. Not concerned. Afraid. She began keeping her own journal. Dates. Times. Exact words. Because if something happened, she needed proof she'd tried. She wrote about the diary. About Rob's refusal to read it. About Michelle's growing anxiety. Michelle, who confided in Tracy late at night. "He watches me," Michelle whispered once. "Sometimes I feel like I'm living with a stranger." "Tell Rob," Tracy urged. Michelle shook her head. "He won't hear it." And she was right. Rob still believed in a version of Nick that no longer existed. The son, not the threat. The contradiction tore Tracy apart. How could a man so outspoken about justice, accountability, and truth refuse to see what was happening in his own home? That question haunted her. Still does. And then came the night that made everything worse. The night Nick confronted her about the diary. He showed up unannounced at her apartment. No call, no warning, just a knock. She opened the door and froze. He knew. "I heard you've been reading my thoughts," he said calmly. Her heart pounded. "What are you talking about?" "My diary." She didn't deny it. "I was worried about you." His expression changed. From calm to something darker. "You violated me." He stepped closer. "You're just like them." She asked him to leave. He didn't. "I can't trust you anymore," he said softly. That sentence chilled her more than any shouting ever could, because it sounded final. When he finally left, Tracy locked the door and slid down against it, shaking. She called Rob again. "He confronted me. He's escalating." Rob paused. Then, "I'll handle it." But handling it, once again, meant doing nothing. From that moment on, the diary disappeared. Nick moved it, destroyed it, or hid it somewhere Tracy never found. But the words didn't disappear. They lived in her head. And they began to line up with reality. Because shortly after, the first official complaint was made. Not by Tracy. Not by Michelle. By a neighbor. Noise. Yelling. Crashing sounds late at night. Police came. Nick answered the door. Calm. Polite. Articulate. No arrest. No report. And Rob breathed a sigh of relief. "See," he told Tracy. "Nothing." But Tracy knew. This wasn't nothing. This was the warning bell. The one right before the collapse. And what happened next? What Tracy says Rob never found out until it was too late would push the family past the point of return. Because just days later, Michelle would confide something to Tracy that would change everything. Something that made the diary feel like a prophecy. But what came next would turn fear into panic and silence into regret. What happens when a mother tells her daughter, in a whisper, "I don't feel safe in my own home"? Because that's exactly what Michelle Singer Reiner told Tracy 1 week before everything began to unravel. And it wasn't said with drama. It wasn't shouted in panic. It was whispered, quiet, almost like she wasn't sure she was allowed to say it out loud. That's what made it so terrifying. Because when someone like Michelle, elegant, composed, deeply private, admits she's afraid of her own son, something's already broken. And the real question becomes, why did no one take her seriously? It was a Tuesday afternoon when Tracy got the call. Her mom didn't want to talk on speaker, didn't want to risk being overheard. So she texted 3 words instead. "Need to talk." That was Michelle's code. For years, the two had a quiet rhythm. The unspoken understanding between women trying to hold a family together while pretending it wasn't falling apart. Tracy showed up that night. No fanfare, no questions. And when she entered the Reiners' Brentwood estate, she knew immediately. Something had shifted. The house felt cold, but not in temperature. Cold in spirit. Dead air. Michelle sat at the end of the long dining table, hands clasped around a glass of untouched wine. Tracy didn't even sit down before asking, "What happened?" Michelle looked up slowly and said the one sentence Tracy says she'll never forget. "I'm afraid he's going to hurt me." No build-up. No context. Just that. 7 words that dropped like a bomb. And in that moment, everything Tracy had feared, everything she had tried to warn Rob about, was now being echoed by the one person he claimed he was trying to protect. "Mom, has he threatened you?" Michelle shook her head, but not convincingly. "It's not what he says. It's how he looks at me. It's how he moves around the house now. Quiet. Watching." Tracy leaned in. "Has he put his hands on you?" "No." Pause. "Not yet." That pause. It wasn't empty. It was filled with every terrifying thing a mother won't say about her son. "He's unpredictable," Michelle whispered. "I walk past his door and he just stares. No emotion. Like I'm not even a person to him anymore." Tracy reached across the table. "We need to do something." But Michelle pulled her hand away. "Rob won't hear it. And Nick, he's worse when he feels cornered." Then she looked directly into her daughter's eyes. I just don't want it to get to that point. It already had. But no one wanted to say it out loud. That night, Tracy made a decision. She was going to intervene, whether Rob liked it or not. The next morning, she showed up at his office, unannounced. "I'm not here to fight," she told him. "I'm here because Mom is scared." Rob looked exhausted, older than she remembered, like the weight of denial was beginning to crush him. "She's exaggerating," he muttered. "She isn't," Tracy shot back. "She said she doesn't feel safe." "That's not drama, Dad. That's desperation." Rob rubbed his temples. "You think I don't see it?" "I do. But what do you want me to do? Kick him out?" "Yes," Tracy said without hesitation. "Before something happens." Rob stood up. "This is still my son. And she's your wife." Silence. Tracy continued. "If this were anyone else, if it were my son, you'd be screaming for help." Still, Rob said nothing. And that silence? That was the answer. Over the next week, Tracy and Michelle had more secret conversations. They spoke in the garden, in the car, on long walks with no phones. And Michelle began to open up more. She told Tracy about the screaming matches, how Nick would deny saying things Michelle knew he said. He would gaslight, deflect, then go silent for days. She told Tracy about a night 2 weeks earlier when Nick slammed a door so hard, a vase shattered. When Michelle cried, he just stared at her. No apology, no emotion. And then he laughed. That's when she began sleeping with the bedroom door locked. "I haven't slept through the night in months," she admitted. "Every noise wakes me." "Why don't you leave?" Tracy asked. Michelle smiled sadly. "This is my home too. Trapped. Not by bars. Not by threats. But by loyalty. By love. By the lie that says, family always sticks together." But things weren't just unraveling at home. They were unraveling inside Nick too. Tracy had started watching from a distance. Security footage. Phone records. Even drive-by check-ins with a private investigator she quietly hired. The investigator, a retired LAPD detective, reviewed the footage. What he saw made Tracy's blood run cold. "Your brother walks the perimeter of the house at night," he said. "Between 2 and 4 a.m. Almost every night. Why? Unclear. But it's methodical. What else? He looks directly into security cameras. Every time. That wasn't paranoia. That was intent. Nick knew he was being watched. And didn't care. Or worse, wanted to be seen." That's when Tracy told the investigator about the diary. And his response chilled her. "You need to make a report." But she didn't. Not yet. Because deep down, she still hoped Rob would come around. Then came the final straw. Tracy was driving home from a meeting when she got a call from Michelle, sobbing. "He tried to break into my bedroom." Tracy pulled over. "What?" "He was drunk or high. I don't know. He was pounding on the door, yelling about voices, about needing to check the walls." "What did Rob do?" "He wasn't home. He doesn't know yet." "Call the police." "I can't. Not until Rob sees it himself." And that was it. The tipping point. Tracy didn't wait. She filed a formal incident report with the LAPD the next day. Described everything. The diary. The threats. The incident. The officer took notes. Then said the words Tracy feared most. "Unless there's direct violence, our hands are tied." And so, nothing happened. Again. Except this time. Nick knew. Michelle told him. She begged him to understand. But Nick didn't respond with remorse. He responded with distance. He stopped talking to her. Stopped acknowledging her presence. Started moving through the house like a ghost. Tracy showed up again that weekend. And when she entered the kitchen, Nick was sitting at the counter, eating cereal. She froze. He looked up, spoon still in hand. "You're good at pretending," he said flatly. "What?" "Pretending you care. Pretending you're family." She tried to keep calm. "You need help, Nick." His eyes narrowed. "No. You need to get out of my way." And just like that, he got up and walked out the back door. That was the last time Tracy saw him before the murders. Days later, Michelle moved into a hotel for 3 nights. Tracy begged her not to return, to press charges, to go public. But Michelle refused. "I won't be the mother who destroys her son, even if he destroyed her peace, even if he might destroy more." That's the thing about loyalty in families like this. It's not love. It's survival disguised as love. And now 2 people are dead. And Tracy is left with a list of ignored warnings. Moments that should have meant something. Red flags no one wanted to see. But it's what Michelle said in their final phone call that Tracy says haunts her most. I still believe he's in there. The little boy I raised. But that little boy was gone. And what happened next would prove it. In the most brutal, irreversible way possible. Can therapy fix someone who doesn't think they're broken? That's the line Tracy Reiner draws when asked if the family ever tried to get Nick help. Because yes, they did. They tried everything. Private therapists, specialists, family counseling, luxury rehab centers with ocean views and yoga instructors flown in from Maui. But here's the problem. None of it worked. Because the one person who needed to be honest the most was the one person who believed everyone else was the problem. Nick Reiner didn't see therapy as a solution. He saw it as an ambush. And according to Tracy, that's when everything escalated. It started with an intervention. But not the kind you see on TV. There were no folded chairs in a circle. No loving letters. No weeping hugs. This was quieter. Calculated. A carefully orchestrated attempt to bring Nick back from the edge, without pushing him over it. The idea came from Michelle. She'd spent weeks researching therapists. Not just any therapist, a trauma-informed specialist with experience dealing with paranoid delusions and adult-onset schizoaffective disorders. Her name was Dr. Catherine Leeds. Discreet, reputable, expensive, but worth it if it meant saving the family. Rob agreed, reluctantly. He still didn't believe Nick was a threat. But Michelle insisted. Just meet her, she said. One session. Nick didn't object. In fact, he seemed almost amused. Sure, he said. Let's play therapy. That response should have been the first red flag. But no one wanted to cancel hope. Not yet. Session 1 was scheduled on a Thursday afternoon. Tracy was present. So was Michelle. Rob stayed out of the room, by design. Dr. Leeds wanted it to feel neutral. Non-confrontational. A place for Nick to speak. And speak, he did. Calmly. Clearly. Persuasively. He talked about stress. About isolation. About creative pressure. About feeling misunderstood by people who claim to love me. He even cracked a few jokes. Dr. Leeds took notes. Michelle smiled nervously. Tracy watched with guarded confusion. Because Nick was performing. Flipping the script. Saying just enough to appear self-aware, but never admitting to the darkness Tracy had seen firsthand. At one point, Dr. Leeds asked about the incident outside Michelle's bedroom door. Nick leaned back and said, I was sleepwalking. I don't remember any of it. But if it made my mom uncomfortable, I'm sorry. He smiled. Dr. Leeds nodded. Tracy clenched her fists. This wasn't therapy. This was manipulation. And Nick was winning. After the session, Dr. Leeds gave a measured response. He's intelligent, she said. Guarded. Defensive. But not unwell. Tracy couldn't believe it. How can you say that? You saw him for 45 minutes. I said not unwell on the surface. Dr. Leeds clarified. I need more time. Possibly solo sessions. Rob took that as good news. He's fine. Just moody. Tracy snapped. He's not fine. He's dangerous. Rob flinched. Don't use that word. Then what word do I use, Dad? What do you call someone who threatens their mother in the middle of the night and then gaslights her the next day? Silence. The kind that fills a room with tension so thick it feels like a storm is coming. And it was. Nick agreed to 3 more sessions. But something shifted after the first. He became sarcastic. Dismissive. He'd show up late. Refused to sit down. Accused Dr. Leeds of taking notes for the FBI. In one session, he asked if she believed in demons. I think people become what others expect them to be, he said. Dr. Leeds asked. And what do people expect you to be? Nick smiled. The villain. When she pressed, he got up and walked out. That was the last time he attended. Just like that, therapy was over. Michelle was devastated. She had clung to the sessions as the last thread of hope. But Tracy wasn't surprised. He doesn't want help, she said. Rob, however, wasn't ready to give up. He suggested another idea, a private retreat center in Oregon. It was a hybrid program, mental health support meets creative rehabilitation. Maybe if he felt like it was about his work, he'd engage, Rob suggested. So they pitched it to Nick as a writing sabbatical. He agreed. For 2 weeks. The first few days went well. He attended morning sessions. Texted Romy. Even FaceTimed Michelle from a sunlit porch. I think it's helping, she told Tracy, cautiously optimistic. But on day 5, everything changed. Nick vanished. He left the facility during a group meditation. Didn't take his phone. Didn't tell staff. Didn't leave a note. He was gone for 3 days. When he returned, He acted like nothing had happened. They were boring, he shrugged. Too many rules. No creativity. Rob flew up to Oregon. They argued. Witnesses say Nick screamed at his father in the hotel lobby. You never listened to me. You only want to fix me when I embarrass you. Tracy found out later that Nick punched a wall that night. But there was no police report. No consequences. Just a quiet flight back to LA. And more silence. At home, Nick became a shadow. He barely spoke. Didn't attend meals. Stayed in the guest house, blinds drawn, phone off. But he was watching. Tracy felt it. Michelle said it too. He's always just there. Lurking in corners. Standing in doorways. Appearing suddenly in hallways without saying a word. Once, Tracy walked past the guest house and saw him staring through the window, unblinking. It didn't feel like family anymore. It felt like surveillance. That's when Tracy made the suggestion no one wanted to hear. Involuntary hold. Rob looked at her like she'd cursed. 5,150. Yes, she said. If he's a danger to himself or others, we can petition. Rob refused. He's not a criminal. No, Tracy said. But he could become one. She begged Michelle to consider it. But Michelle was exhausted. She shook her head. I just want things to go back to normal. But normal was never coming. Because what Nick did next would fracture the last remaining thread of trust between them. And it involved something so twisted, so calculated, that even Tracy admits. That's when I realized we weren't dealing with someone who was confused. We were dealing with someone who knew exactly what he was doing. But what came next wasn't a scream. It wasn't a fight. It was a letter. One that Michelle found in her pillowcase. And the words written inside would make her blood run cold. What kind of person leaves a chilling letter under their mother's pillow and then vanishes without a trace? That was the question on everyone's lips when Nick Reiner disappeared. No warning. No bags. No phone calls. Just gone. But before we get to the disappearance, we have to talk about the letter. Because that wasn't just a cry for help. It was a statement. A threat veiled as poetry. And when Michelle read it, her hands were shaking so hard, she dropped her glass of water. Let's rewind. It was a Thursday night. Late. The house was quiet. Michelle had just finished brushing her hair, about to climb into bed. She fluffed her pillows, same as always. But as she turned one over, something slipped out. A folded piece of yellow paper. Not a card. Not a sticky note. Old. Crinkled. Almost deliberate. She opened it. And read. To the mother who forgot how to love me. I see what you think I can't. I hear the whispers behind walls. You think you're safe. But the illusion of safety is a cage. And every cage has a breaking point. N. That was it. No signature. No date. Just that. Michelle froze. The room suddenly felt colder. Smaller. She called Tracy immediately. Tracy picked up on the first ring. He left a note. Michelle whispered. It was under my pillow. What does it say? I don't know. It's not clear. But it's not good. Tracy drove over within the hour. She read the note once, then again. Her stomach sank. This isn't poetry, she said. It's a warning. Rob wasn't home that night. He'd been staying in Palm Springs for a film-related event. When Tracy called, he was half asleep. I'll be home tomorrow, he mumbled. Don't panic. We'll talk when I'm back. But by the time Rob returned, Nick was already gone. It started the next morning. Michelle knocked on Nick's door around 11 a.m., something she rarely did. No answer. She tried again. Still nothing. Assuming he was asleep, she let it go. But by evening, his car was still in the driveway, and no one had seen him. Tracy texted. No response. She called. Voicemail. The guest house was unlocked. Inside. Lights off. Laptop open. Half a glass of water on the counter. No sign of struggle. No sign of planning. Just absence. And a strange kind of stillness that made Tracy's skin crawl. For the first time, Michelle agreed to call the police. A missing persons report was filed late that night. But without signs of distress or evidence of danger, law enforcement didn't prioritize the case. He's an adult, they said. He's allowed to leave. But it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like something darker. Because the note wasn't the only thing Nick left behind. In his room, Tracy found a small notebook tucked beneath a stack of comic books. This wasn't the same diary as before. This one was different. It was filled with single sentences. Fragments. Almost like confessions. Sometimes I dream of silence. Real silence. They think I'm stupid. She locked her door again. Good. That means she's listening now. Maybe this family doesn't deserve saving. I already know how this ends. Tracy showed the notebook to Rob. His face paled. Still, he refused to call it a threat. It's expression, he argued. He's a writer. Tracy slammed the book shut. No, this is not a screenplay, Dad. He didn't reply. For 3 days, the Reiners waited. No Nick. No calls. Just an empty guest house and a house filled with dread. Michelle couldn't sleep. Tracy stayed over, afraid to leave her mother alone. Even Rob began to shift. Tracy caught him staring at the backyard one night, a glass of whiskey in hand, muttering to himself. He always came back before, he said. Before what? Tracy asked. Rob didn't answer. Then, on the 4th day, Nick returned. No fanfare. No apology. Just walked in through the back gate, barefoot, carrying a takeout bag. Michelle was in the kitchen and nearly dropped a bowl when she saw him. Where were you? She gasped. Nick shrugged. Needed air. She stared at him. You disappeared for days. I didn't know I had to ask permission. His tone was sharp, mocking. Tracy entered seconds later and nearly confronted him on the spot. But Michelle put a hand on her arm. Not now. Nick walked to the fridge, grabbed a soda, sat down like nothing had happened. But something had changed, and everyone could feel it. He didn't explain where he'd been, didn't say who he'd seen, didn't answer any questions. And no one pushed too hard, because no one wanted to ignite him. That was the new fear in the house. The Reiners weren't living with a son. They were living with a fuse. And everyone was terrified to be the spark. Later that night, Tracy knocked on his door. She needed to ask, needed to understand. Where did you go? Nick opened the door just wide enough for her to see his face. I went to a place where people don't lie. That was all he said, then closed the door in her face. Michelle insisted on installing a second lock on her bedroom door that week. Rob didn't fight it this time. And Tracy? She started recording every conversation. Not secretly, openly. If he does something, she told her friend, I need proof that we saw it coming. That friend would later tell prosecutors. She was terrified. And more than once, she said, I think Nick's building up to something. I don't know what, but I don't think we'll survive it. And she was right, because what happened in the next 72 hours would escalate everything. It began with a dinner party and ended with a near-violent confrontation no one in the family would forget. The illusion was breaking. The truth was cracking through the walls. And Nick? He was just getting started. But what came next was public. And this time, there would be witnesses. What would you do if you found a message so disturbing you believed reading it aloud could make it real? That was the choice Michelle Reiner faced. And the decision she made next would haunt everyone left behind. The dinner party was meant to calm things down. That's what Rob told himself, anyway. A handful of friends. Soft lighting. Comfort food. Normal conversation. The old trick. If the world looks stable, maybe it will feel stable. Nick agreed to attend. That alone felt like progress. But Tracy noticed something the moment he arrived. He was smiling. Not warmly. Not awkwardly. Precisely. Like someone playing a role they'd already rehearsed. He hugged guests. Complimented the food. Cracked jokes that landed just well enough to make people relax. And that's what terrified her most. Because when Nick was angry, he was obvious. When he was silent, he was unpredictable. But when he was charming, that meant something else entirely. Halfway through dinner, Tracy excused herself to use the restroom upstairs. As she passed Michelle's bedroom, she noticed the door slightly ajar. That never happened anymore. Michelle kept it locked. Always. Tracy paused. Then she heard it. Paper. A soft tearing sound. She pushed the door open. Michelle was standing by the dresser, her back turned, hands shaking. What are you doing? Tracy asked. Michelle jumped. Then she held up something Tracy immediately recognized. A folded sheet of paper. Already ripped in half. Her face was pale. Did Nick write that? Tracy asked. Michelle nodded. What does it say? Michelle hesitated, then shook her head. You don't want to read it. Tracy stepped closer. I need to. Michelle looked at her daughter, eyes glassy. He says I've chosen my side. That I made him this way. That when people choose sides, there are consequences. Tracy felt her chest tighten. Is there anything else? Michelle's voice dropped. He wrote. That the house remembers everything. What does that mean? I don't know, Michelle whispered. But I don't want Rob to see this. Tracy froze. What? If he reads it, he'll confront Nick. And if he confronts Nick, she swallowed hard. I don't know what he'll do. Tracy reached for the letter. Michelle pulled it back. I'm going to destroy it. Mom. No, Michelle said firmly. I won't trigger something I can't stop. And before Tracy could say another word, Michelle tore the paper into strips. Slowly, methodically, each rip sounded louder than the last. When she was done, she dropped the pieces into the trash. Tracy stared at them. Evidence. Warnings. Gone. And just like that, the truth vanished again. Downstairs, the party continued. Laughter drifted up the stairs. Nick clinked glasses with a guest. Rob looked relaxed for the first time in weeks. And Tracy felt sick. Because the house wasn't calm. It was coiled. That night, after the guests left, Tracy confronted Michelle again. You can't keep doing this, she said. Hiding things doesn't protect anyone. Michelle sank onto the bed. I just want one peaceful night. You're sacrificing safety for peace. Michelle looked up, eyes full of tears. I'm tired of living in fear of my own child. Tracy softened. I know, but silence isn't saving us. It's feeding him. Michelle said nothing. Because deep down, she knew Tracy was right. The next morning, Rob noticed something was off. Michelle was distant. Quiet. Nick hadn't come out of the guest house. Tracy was tense. What happened last night? Rob asked. Nothing, Michelle said quickly. Too quickly. Rob narrowed his eyes. Nothing ever happens until it does, he muttered. He walked upstairs, heading toward Michelle's room. Tracy followed. Rob, don't. He stopped at the trash can. Looked down. Saw the shredded paper. His face changed. He picked up a piece. Then another. Did Nick write something? He asked slowly. Michelle tried to intercept. It's nothing. Rob stood straighter. Nothing doesn't get destroyed. He gathered the strips, laying them on the bed, trying to piece them together. Tracy watched his hands tremble. He read what he could. Not all of it. Not enough. But enough. Consequences, he read aloud. Michelle broke. I didn't want you to see it. Rob sat down hard. Why didn't you tell me? Because you keep believing him over us. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Rob rubbed his face. I thought if I stayed calm, he'd calm down. Tracy's voice cracked. He's not calming down, Dad. He's escalating. Rob stared at the scraps. For the first time, something shifted. Fear replaced denial. But fear alone doesn't stop momentum. That afternoon, Rob went to the guest house. Alone. No warning. No plan. Tracy found out after the fact. Michelle was in the kitchen when her phone rang. It was Rob. Where are you? She asked. With Nick. Her heart stopped. What are you doing? I'm talking to him. Michelle closed her eyes. Don't push him. I'm not pushing. I'm listening. She wanted to believe that. But Tracy didn't. Because listening requires boundaries. And Rob had never learned how to set them with Nick. What happened inside that guest house remains disputed. Nick says they talked calmly. Rob said it was productive. But Tracy noticed the aftermath. Nick didn't come out for hours. When he finally did, his face was blank. Not angry. Not sad. Resolved. He walked past Tracy without a word. Later that night, Tracy overheard him on the phone. His voice was low. Measured. I know now, he said. He finally showed his hand. She didn't know who he was talking to. But the tone chilled her. Because it sounded like closure. Not confusion. That same night, Michelle packed a small suitcase. Just essentials. 3 nights worth. She told Tracy quietly. I'm going to a hotel. Good, Tracy said. Stay there. Michelle hesitated. I'll come back after things cool down. Tracy shook her head. Things aren't cooling down. But Michelle kissed her cheek. I'll call you tomorrow. She left before midnight. That would be the last time Tracy saw her mother alive. Rob stayed behind. He insisted on it. I can't abandon him, he said. Tracy begged him to leave too. Dad, please. Just a few days. He refused. I need to fix this. Tracy looked at him, eyes burning. You can't fix something you won't admit is broken. Rob didn't respond. Because deep down, he already knew. The next morning, Nick was gone again. No note. No text. Just gone. But this time, it wasn't a disappearance. It was preparation. And what investigators would later find in the guest house would suggest something far more deliberate than anyone wanted to believe. Because tucked away in a drawer, missed at first glance, was something Tracy never knew existed. A timeline. Dates. Times. Notes. And at the top of the page, 3 words that would reframe everything. Point of no return. But what happened next would turn suspicion into certainty. Because the house would speak. And when it did, the truth would finally come out. What would you do if you discovered a hidden corner of your own home? One filled with objects that shouldn't exist, connected to someone you trusted. Because when Rob Reiner stepped into the basement that day, she wasn't expecting to find anything unusual. She was just looking for a suitcase. But what she found instead would make her question everything. It started innocently enough. Romy had come by the house that afternoon to check on her dad. Michelle was at the hotel. Tracy was in meetings. The estate felt quieter than usual. Too quiet. She hadn't planned to stay long. Just grab a few things, check in, and leave. But as she walked through the hallway, a text from her friend popped up. Bring your luggage to Palm Springs. Fancy weekend. Romy smiled. She remembered the old travel cases stored in the basement closet, where her parents used to keep all the extra stuff no one needed anymore. So she headed downstairs. The Reiner basement wasn't like most people's basements. It was sprawling, climate-controlled, clean, lined with shelves of DVDs, scripts, storage bins from old film sets. The kind of space you could get lost in. Romy hadn't been down there in months, maybe even years. She flicked on the lights and stepped into the hallway, her shoes clicking softly on the polished cement floor. She headed toward the storage closet in the far corner. As she passed by the old wine racks, she caught a glimpse of something out of place. A door, slightly ajar. That door was never open. It led to an old maintenance room, once used when the house had full-time staff living on the grounds. No one had reason to go in there anymore. Curious, she pushed it open and froze. The room wasn't empty. There were items on the ground. Stacks of paper, crumpled notes, drawings taped to the wall. At first, Romy thought maybe Rob had used the space to write. But the more she looked, the stranger it became. One wall had names written in black marker. Over and over. Michelle, 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 Romy, Romy, Tracy. No last names. No dates. Just repetition. Beside the names, drawings. Crude, almost childlike sketches. A figure standing in front of a house. Another figure in bed with red lines around it. One sketch appeared to be someone holding a knife. Her breath caught. She stepped closer. The walls were covered with notes. Some scribbled so faintly they were barely legible. One read, "You think I don't know what this house hides." Another, "She sleeps behind locks. Like that matters." Her hands shook. She spotted a pile of manila folders. Inside them, printouts. Emails between Michelle and Tracy. Text screenshots. Photos she didn't know had been taken. One of her, sitting in the garden, reading a book. She backed away. Who had been in here? But deep down she already knew. Romy ran upstairs. Her first call was to Tracy. She was breathless. "You need to come here now." "What's wrong?" "Just now." Tracy arrived within 20 minutes. She followed Romy down into the basement. When she saw the room, her eyes widened. This wasn't here before. They stepped inside together. "This is like a surveillance room," Tracy whispered. "Not cameras, but observation. Obsession." They snapped photos. Tracy carefully picked up a torn notebook page from the corner. It read, "She watches me too much now. But she won't stop me. None of them will." That was the moment Romy started crying. This was right below us. All this time, Tracy didn't respond. Because she was already thinking 10 steps ahead. And what terrified her most was that this wasn't a secret hideout. This was staging, a rehearsal room, and the performance hadn't started yet. That evening, Tracy called Rob. He didn't answer, so she drove to the house. When she arrived, he was sitting in the living room, looking out at the garden. She handed him the photos. "Tell me again that this is just expression." Rob didn't say a word, just stared at the pictures. Finally, he muttered, "I don't know this person." Tracy snapped. "Yes, you do. He lives in your guest house." Silence. "I think he's planning something," Tracy said. "This is escalating." Rob looked up. "I think you're right." Those 5 words came too late. But they still mattered. Because it meant, for the first time, Rob Reiner was afraid. Romy, unable to sleep, texted Michelle at the hotel. "I found something in the basement. I think it's bad. Really bad." Michelle called immediately. Romy explained everything. And for the first time, Michelle didn't minimize. She cried. Not loudly. Softly. Like someone who had just realized they were already too deep inside the maze to find a way out. "I'm not going back there," she said. "Good," Romy replied. But Michelle was already making a plan. She wanted to confront Nick. Not to provoke him, but to draw a line. to set a boundary, to finally say, enough. And that's when she made a decision. She would come home, just for one night. Just to talk, just to see him face to face. Tracy begged her not to. Mom, don't go back. I'll stay in my room, Michelle promised. I just need him to see my face. But what came next would change everything. Because when Michelle returned the next day, Nick was already waiting, and Romy would be the one to discover what he left behind. But this time, it wasn't just notes, or threats, or sketches. It was evidence. Real, undeniable evidence that this wasn't delusion anymore. It was intention. And when Romy showed it to police, they stopped calling this a domestic dispute. They started calling it a threat assessment. But by then, it was already too late. Have you ever been in a room where everyone's smiling, but you can feel something dangerous moving just beneath the surface? Because that's how every single guest later described that dinner. Polite, elegant, and absolutely charged with something no one could name at the time. The dinner party was Rob's idea. Again, a reset, a show of normalcy, a way to prove, to himself more than anyone, that the family wasn't unraveling. People need to see we're okay, he told Tracy earlier that week. If Nick feels included, maybe he'll calm down. That word again, calm. As if calm was something you could summon by arranging place settings and lighting candles. Tracy hated the idea. Romy hated it more. Michelle didn't say much at all, but she agreed to come home for it. Just for the evening. Just dinner. The guest list was small. 2 longtime friends. A producer couple Rob trusted. 1 neighbor. No press. No assistants. No distractions. Nick agreed to attend without argument. That alone unsettled Tracy, because by now, she had learned something important about her brother. When he argued, you could predict him. When he complied, you couldn't. The house looked beautiful. Soft jazz played in the background. Candles flickered along the dining table. Food was laid out carefully, like a scene from a lifestyle magazine. Michelle wore a simple dress. Romy stayed close to her side. Tracy positioned herself across the table from Nick. And Nick? Nick arrived early. Too early. He greeted guests warmly, pulled out chairs, complimented Michelle's cooking. If you didn't know the backstory, you'd think he was the most attentive son in the world. But Tracy noticed something else. He was watching everyone. Not casually. Intentionally. Tracking movements. Noting reactions. Like he was studying the room. Dinner began smoothly. Conversation stayed light. Film stories. Travel plans. Harmless jokes. Nick laughed at the right moments. Even Rob relaxed. Tracy watched Michelle's shoulders lower slightly, just a bit. For a fleeting second, she wondered if she'd been wrong. If maybe this really was the turning point. Then Nick spoke. So, he said casually, anyone else ever feel like families are just cages we pretend are homes? The table went quiet. A guest chuckled awkwardly. That's deep, someone said. Nick smiled. Is it? Or is it obvious? Tracy felt her stomach tighten. She jumped in quickly. Families are complicated, she said. But they're not cages. Nick turned toward her. Easy to say when you have the key. The air shifted. Rob cleared his throat. Nick. It's okay, Nick interrupted. I'm just talking. But he wasn't just talking. He was testing. As the night went on, the comments became sharper. Still subtle. Still deniable. But pointed. He joked about secrets. About people playing roles. About how truth always leaks. At one point, he raised his glass. To honesty, he said. Even when it's inconvenient. Tracy didn't drink. Neither did Michelle. The breaking point came after dessert. Everyone had moved into the living room. Music low. Lights dimmed. Nick stood near the fireplace, leaning against the mantel. He looked at Michelle and smiled. You look tired, he said. She stiffened. I'm fine. You sure, he asked. You've been locking your door again. The room froze. Romy stood up. Nick, that's not appropriate. He tilted his head. What? I'm just being observant. Rob stepped forward. That's enough. Nick turned to his father. Enough of what? Enough of making people uncomfortable. Nick laughed softly. I think they've been uncomfortable for a long time. He took a step closer to Michelle. Tracy moved instantly, placing herself between them. Back off. For the first time that night, Nick's smile vanished. And what replaced it made Tracy's heart race. Pure resentment. You don't get to tell me what to do, he said quietly. Guests shifted nervously. Someone murmured, maybe we should. Nick raised his voice. No. Let's talk. Since everyone's here. Rob tried to intervene. Nick, stop. Nick ignored him. You all sit here pretending everything's fine. Laughing, drinking, while you whisper behind my back. That's not true, Michelle said shakily. Nick's eyes locked onto hers. Liar. The word hit the room like a slap. Romy grabbed her phone.